Hello everyone and welcome to the .NET Core podcast, the only podcast which is devoted to .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, EF Core, SignalR and not forgetting the .NET Core community itself. I am your host, Jamie Cabrogman-Taylor, and this is episode 64, Augmented Reality with Lee Englestone. In this episode, I spoke with Lee about just what augmented reality is, how it's different from virtual reality, and how you can start leveraging Xamarin and .NET in order to create AR-based apps today. So let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and let the show begin. So thank you ever so much for taking some time out of your evening, Lee. I know that we're all incredibly busy these days, even with, the incident. I don't like to name it, but, with what's going on at the moment, everybody's really busy. So I really appreciate you taking some time out to sit and talk with me today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So I thought, first of all, could you maybe give us a brief description of, I hate saying this, but who you are and the work that you do? Just for the people who are tuning in and may not have heard of you or some of the work or some of the talks that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lee Englestone. I am the software development manager at leasing.com. My day job, 9 to 5, is predominantly web-based, working on the website leasing.com. But recently I've been spending quite a bit of time exploring with augmented reality, and specifically being able to do it using .NET and C#. And I'm just finding it really, really useful and really, really fun, but a little bit difficult because I don't feel there's not much in the way out there for C# and .NET developers unless you want to be programming for the HoloLens. So what I'm trying to do is sort of share the knowledge that I've gained learning this stuff so that other .NET developers can play around with this stuff as well.
Sure, okay. So there's a couple of things to unpack there. Before I ask you what augmented reality is, does this mean then that there will be an augmented reality version of the company website at some point? Or, I just like to ask silly questions like that.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid no. I think my experiments with augmented reality is just that, experiments at the moment. That's not to say that we couldn't leverage it to use it in various industries, and the automotive industry that I work in has already seen some augmented reality innovations. So when you start combining both the automotive market and the sort of retail market and e-commerce, maybe there are some things we could do there, but nothing planned or in pipelines just yet.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. So I guess, could you give us a brief description of what augmented reality is? Because taking a two steps back and putting my hands up and saying, I know next to nothing about it, I'm thinking Minority Report, right? That whole gloves thing where he's using the computer just by waving his hands in the air. I'm thinking Xbox Kinect. You did mention HoloLens earlier on. Is it that kind of thing? What's the deal here? And is it different to virtual reality? And if so, what's the difference?
Sure. I'll try my very best to explain some of those terms. So when I'm talking about augmented reality, what I tend to mean is the ability to make something appear in the real world around you that isn't actually there. And that is different from virtual reality, because in virtual reality, you put a headset on and your whole vision is occluded. You can't see anything. The only things you can see is created by a program that's running. Whereas augmented reality, there's still a program running and it's still inserting things into the real world around you, but you can still see the real world around you. So that's sort of the differences, how I would describe augmented reality and virtual reality. So to answer your question as to if we're getting a bit closer to the Minority Report, I'd say yes and no. So yes, I think that we're starting to build user interfaces that have got a higher degree of freedom. So almost, if you put a headset on, you can build a virtual world or virtual interface. The same with augmented reality. You've got 360 degrees freedom, which is very liberating, because with up until fairly recently, we've been very restricted with our 2D interfaces, with our little tiny black screens and slightly bigger laptops and desktop screens. But this is one of the reasons I really do like playing around with augmented reality. It feels like a very, very creative way of making things appear. And you start second guessing how you can build interfaces. You've not just got, everything could just be at one distance away from you, or everything could just be in your immediate line of sight. You can start placing things to the side of you, above you, in front of other things. So I'm definitely enjoying that aspect of it. So Minority Report, I think we're getting closer. Maybe without the creepy conspiracy sort of stuff that goes on in it.
That's fair enough. I do remember, it's definitely not augmented reality, but I do remember when like the Oculus and all of those VR headsets started coming out, I thought to myself, that's amazing. I'm limited to anywhere between a 15 and 30 inch screen. I can throw these headsets on and have my windows all around me, or I can just have one massive not screen, but one massive area just for my code, and literally look up and down the code, pitching you on my head to look around it, which I feel like that would be a good use of my time.
It's exactly the sort of thing that I do like experimenting with. It does feel like virtuality has had a bit of a hard time over the years. It's sort of been up and down the sort of hype roller coaster of being the next biggest thing like 10 years ago. And people then dismissing it, saying, it's not really delivered. But then, as you say, fairly recently, the most recent virtual reality the headsets are very, very good. And I've never played Beat Saber, but I really want to play that. That looks like a lot of fun.
Oh my goodness. I do remember, so my brother and I do a video game related podcast. We just sort of talk with our friends about video gamey things. And near to where I live, there's one of those, you can pay some money and go in and play all of the arcade games. And on one of the upper levels, I think there's like 2 or 3 levels, on the upper level, they do have Beat Saber. And, you put the headset on, put the headphones on, put the gloves on, and, he was literally jumping around the room to get around stuff and waving his arms around. That was loads of fun to watch. And I have a feeling it was loads of fun to play, but it's definitely not for me.
No. I would get one in a heartbeat. I just need to convince my wife that it's for sort of exercise purposes or something like that, I think. That's
it. You just show her a Beat Saber and say, look, Ollie, but you're doing all of your moves. You're exercising every part of your body. Yeah, that could totally work, right?
That's it.
Excellent. Okay. So we talked about augmented reality and how it's this sort of thing that we're moving towards. So before we talk about as a developer, like I say, I'm completely new to augmented reality. As a user of it, do I need anything specific? Like, you said then, with virtual reality, you tend to put a headset on and carry on. I do remember a number of years ago, there was a project called Google Glass. Is that similar to augmented reality? Is it a case of I just have an app and I sort of look around and it captures the camera and draws some things on it? What's the actual, as a user,
Sure, there's different ways that we can experience augmented reality. I think, Google did experiment a bit with Google Glass a few years ago. It didn't, unfortunately, take off. One of the main reasons was privacy concerns, I think, because you could basically record people and they wouldn't know about it. And we're always going to run into these sort of moral problems, and we're going to run into them in future, I'm sure. But I think what's a lot of people are doing now is taking advantage of our mobile phones that we carry all around with us all the time, which makes sense because these are very powerful devices. You just got to look at the processing speed that these things have. They're incredible. And they've got an increasing number of sophisticated cameras on as well, with the depth perception and all sorts. So it does make sense for us to be able to wave our phones around and see things that aren't there via augmented reality. And I'm seeing a number of industries taking advantage of this. One of the biggest ones was Pokemon Go. If you remember, about 5 years ago, which was released, and you could walk around and you could try and find Pokemon and train them. And I didn't actually ever play it myself, but it was a lot of fun, I believe, and you could trade them and stuff like that, and find gyms to get your Pokemon to work out at. And it was one of the things that really made me sit up and think, wow, this augmented reality, it's going to be big, because it proved to me that people are willing to wave their phones around and make things appear there that aren't actually there. They quite enjoy it as well. So I don't know if you know, but Pokemon Go in the last 5 years has made $3 billion. That's it's not a small sum. Yes, that's billion with a B. So it's not all about entertainment. You do get a lot of games developed it, which makes sense because it's a lot of fun. There's another one where you can make the floor look like lava, which is great for kids because they do that in their imagination anyway. But when it comes to big businesses, they want to know how they can make money out of it and how they can sell their products with it. So I'm starting to see more manufacturers and retail outlets showing how their different products could appear in your home. And that's everything from a food mixer or a fridge freezer to a Gucci watch on your wrist or a Burberry handbag, or even trainers and clothes. You know, we can, there's some apps now that let you see how they look on you. So it feels like the businesses are starting to understand that there's a lot of money to be made using augmented reality, that people want to use augmented reality, and everyone's already carrying these devices around that are fully capable of delivering these augmented reality experiences. So it's up to sort of developers like us to be building experiences to make for these businesses.
Sure. Okay. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I do remember at an ex-employer of mine, they had a project that they were building for a series of for a company that builds houses. And the idea was you go on their website, you say, I want to buy a house. And, you go through this step of, I want 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms or whatever. And then part of that buying the house is it would be partially furnished for you and decorated and stuff. And so the project that the folks that I was working with, I didn't get to work on the project, but the project that they were working on was you would walk around this house inside the web browser and you would go, nope, don't like that, put that cupboard in, or don't like that wallpaper, swap it out for that. Mm-hmm. And it feels like that's kind of augmented reality-ish. Like it's not exactly that because you're not actually walking around in the room and swapping things out, mm-hmm. but it's being presented to you on the screen.
Yeah, I think anything which sort of helps your imagination is a good use case for this sort of thing. I mean, IKEA, they do an app, I think, where you can go through their catalogue and see what the various chairs look like in your living room. And I think when the big players are starting to do this, then the small and medium enterprise businesses start doing it as well, or the startups start doing it. And it feels like we are just on the cusp of a really big tidal wave of augmented reality experiences. They've been predominantly made for the devices up to date. There's dozens and dozens of manufacturers that are all racing to become first to market to create augmented reality glasses. And they might still, the processing of these glasses might still happen on our phones. That might be doing the hard work. But certainly, if we can get there and we don't have to wave our phones around anymore, we can just look for our glasses, then I think that is going to make even more people interested in this technology.
Excellent. I do feel like it's sort of come on leaps and bounds in, say, the last 10 years or so. So when I was at university, 2004 to 2008, in around 2006, I had this graphics and reality class, and the lecturer was saying, so what we've got is we've got these little placards with these little patterns on it, and they were about the size of maybe a coaster or a beer mat, and you would hold the placard under the camera, and they had written some software that recognized the pattern and displayed a 3D model on screen. It would show you that. And that was 2006. Wow. And now we're at a point where you can do that without having to have the little pattern, right? Mm-hmm. You could just go, there's a 3D model, throw it somewhere on screen and have it wander around. I know that a friend of mine was showing me before the incident, right? A friend of mine was showing me his phone, and he was using, I think, Snapchat, and you can create this little 3D character, and you just literally point your phone at the floor, and your 3D character walks up on screen and interacts with things that are on screen. So he pointed at his table, and his, the leg of his table. His character walked on, not looking, bonked into it and fell over. And I'm like, just the sheer amount of CPU power to do that must be amazing. And then the fact that you could do it on a device in your hand. And like I said, my other experience is 2006, where we're holding up pieces of card with patterns on it. It's leaps and bounds, you know?
Yeah, it's certainly come a long way from what would have been specialist software probably written during your university years to what's now probably that second example is probably just built upon frameworks where a developer can readily pick this sort of a framework up and just start making experiences with it, which is what I tend to be doing these days. I'm not writing complex mathematics or doing anything too complex. I'm just using out the box augmented reality stuff that you can do using the Apple's AR Kit framework.
It's very much like when people ask me about what it's like to be a programmer, you know, when they're saying, what's it like doing web dev or console dev or whatever? And I say, you know, the majority of the time you're playing with Lego. You've got these prefabricated bits and you're sticking them together and see what happens, right? Mm-hmm. You're writing the glue that holds them together, and you're writing code that helps to transform data from one place to another. But for the majority of the time, for the like 99% of your average cases for, say, web dev, it's pull this library in, pull in ASP.NET Core. That gives you all of the stuff required to actually receive requests, send responses. It's then your job to do the business logic. Well, guess what? You're going to use JSON. You're pulling in something to do something with JSON. You're going to talk to a database. You pull something in to talk to a database. And then you're just sort of gluing those layers together, right?
Yeah, that's a good example. We're definitely sort of in our line of work, we're sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, all those brilliant people that have come before us and all those brilliant people that came before them.
Oh, most definitely. So I guess is that the case with, you were saying then, you know, you do this kind of thing with your augmented reality experimentations and you'll work with that. Is that very much the case? Is it just I'll pull in some frameworks and do the little bit, I'm doing the bunny quotes there for people who are listening, the glue bit that sort of glues it all together. You're just basically doing that? I don't want to sort of reduce what you're doing, but...
Yeah, that's fine. So I can only talk really about the AR Kit, Apple's AR Kit framework, which I've experimented quite a lot with. There is so much built-in stuff in that you really don't have to do much of the complicated stuff yourself. So in there, you've got things like image detection. So if it detects an image in a scene, it'll fire an event, and then maybe you can place something else in the scene near that detected image. And then when you move that image, anything you placed around it will also move. You can do face tracking, so that if it detects a face in a scene, it could it tracks its movements, and you think, well, why would you want to do that? Well, there's I think, is it Specsavers, or there's a business that you can try on different glasses frames. So you've got to be able to track the face to do that. So there's that, and then you've got plane detection that's built in as well, so it could detect surfaces like floors and walls, because they're going to serve as our boundaries, because we want our experiences to sort of be the same in the real world, and you don't want to be in the real world. You can't go through a wall, can you, or through the floor? So if we want to place things in a scene, we want it to hit these boundaries. So that's just 3 out of the box. You've got, you know, face detection, image detection, facial tracking, but there's a whole bunch more. I think there's body detection as well. That's, you know, I'm not writing any complex code to be able to identify a face or to identify a surface or any image processing stuff. It's all built in. All I'm doing is just building upon that to make some cooler experiences, for want of a better word.
Excellent. Okay. So obviously I'm a .NET dev, right? If I want to do .NET things and augmented reality things, do I need to go out and get some very specific software and hardware? Or, I mean, you were saying then you're using Apple AR Kit, right? So obviously I can't leverage that on a Windows machine or an Android device, right?
Yes, I'll try and explain a bit. So the way I came about it was I wanted to do some basic development for iOS devices. So I went out and got a Mac, but then I got distracted by Apple's AR Kit stuff. I thought, this augmented reality stuff looks good, but I need to go off and learn Swift and Xcode. And then I realized found out that Xamarin had converted the AR Kit or ported it to .NET, so that I could write C# and .NET code, call this ARKit framework, and deploy to my iPhone through Visual Studio for Mac, Visual Studio is a very familiar environment for me, all without touching Xcode too much or using Swift or Objective-C. So then it became very easy for me because I already had an iPhone, I already had a Mac that unfortunately you still need a Mac on the network or to do the compilation, which is great because I didn't want to learn Swift or Objective-C, I'll be perfectly honest with you. So being able to make or create augmented reality experiences using C# and .NET just suited me down to the ground in the comfort of my very familiar Visual Studio. And that's what I'm really trying to tell other developers, .NET developers about, because last time I checked, there were a heck of a lot of .NET developers. If you look at the last Stack Overflow survey, there's a factors more .NET developers than there are Swift developers, except Swift developers have had all this fun playing with augmented reality for a while now. Now I want to tell .NET developers how they can write C# code and target the iPhone and create these experiences using tools and languages that they're familiar with.
Okay, excellent. That sounds good. So then, so I can use Xamarin, I guess, to be able to pull that in. So I guess, I don't know whether you'll have much experience with it because you were saying, you mentioned iOS a few times, but if I want to make something that's augmented reality that's both Android and iOS, obviously I'm guessing I can't use Apple's ARKit bindings for Xamarin, but maybe there's something else for Android. Is that how it works?
So the answer is no, you won't be able to use ARKit to target Android, but Android have developed their own sort of augmented reality framework called AR Core. And unfortunately, I've not got much experience with that, so I can't go into too much detail. However, one of the benefits of using Xamarin is that if you write your code in a sort of cross-platform way and use dependency injection in the right way, I believe you could work out if the device if your app's being deployed to or built for a iOS device or an Android device, and then perhaps load the appropriate augmented reality framework, either ARKit or AR Core. The code's probably going to be different, I imagine. These are two different frameworks, but you could, in theory, possibly target both and have a bit of code reuse, but they are still different augmented reality frameworks.
Okay, that makes sense. So like you would have, so from my perspective, I'm going to have in my solution, I'm going to have maybe an iOS specific project and an Android specific project, and maybe like a shared or a core project that has all my business logic-y things. And then perhaps if I'm on iOS, I'm going to use, did you say it was ARKit for Apple? So that will be included in the iOS project. And when my iOS project is running on Apple, it will be using ARKit. And then in the Android one, in the Android project, it will be pulling in AR Core. And then when it's running on an Android device, it will be using that. But because you're only pulling the one library in, and like you said, dependency injecting it into the correct one, you don't really have to worry about it so much, I guess.
I think so. It's not something I've tried, but I do remember a code sample where someone asked exactly the same question. Can I create a project that I can create augmented reality, a similar augmented reality experience on both my Android device and my iOS device? And I'm pretty sure they did something quite clever with dependency injection, depending on what the device was that was being built or targeted.
Okay, that makes sense. So then can I use the augmented reality things inside of Unity as well? Because I'm thinking if there is, let me talk you through my process, right? My thought process is essentially if there are Xamarin/.NET bindings for ARKit and there are Xamarin/.NET bindings for AR Core, then is there something similar for Unity?
So I've not used Unity that much, or the augmented reality stuff in it. I believe they deliver augmented reality experiences through using something called AR Foundation, which I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, so apologies if I am wrong, I believe is just an abstraction over ARKit or AR Core.
Right.
So they I've built just a layer on top of those other frameworks, I think.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, if you the way that I like to run these is, if you're not sure, then yeah, someone can point out that maybe this bit of knowledge is a bit lacking. You know, the way I always approach it is, if I don't know, then I'm going to go look it up. So if somebody, you know, and the reason I'm asking you these questions is because I don't know whether you know these things, and I'd like to know. You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about some of the things that ARKit can do via the augmented reality bindings for Xamarin, and I'm guessing you can do, like you said, if you wanted to, you can learn Swift and ARKit at the same time, except that becomes difficult to manage, right? The way that I've always told people is, learn one thing first and then learn another, because if you're getting errors with Swift, let's say you go and build something in a language you don't have any experience with, using a framework you don't have any experience with, first time you get an error, you don't know whether it's the language, the framework, the tooling, you know, all of these things, right? So it makes sense that you can sort of wrap all of this up and put it inside of a .NET experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I first started trying to learn how to call various functionality in ARKit from a C# project, I ran into a small problem that not many other people are doing that. So there weren't actually many code samples or tutorials online. There were one or two, but not many. So then what I had to do is I'd very easily be able to find the equivalent in Swift or Objective-C. So most of my time is trying to work out what they were trying to do in that sample and then convert it into C#. And this is one of the things I'm trying to do. I've got a website that I'm putting together and I'll speak about later, where I'm collating all these samples that I've almost translated into C# so that the next developer after me who wants to do the same thing in C# doesn't have to translate it from Swift or Objective-C like I have. And someone said to me, well, why don't you just write it natively in Swift and Objective-C? And my only answer is, well, because I don't want to, and I know C#, I know .NET, and someone went through a lot of trouble to actually port it Xamarin went through a lot of effort to port it into a way that it can be called from .NET. So I don't see any reason why I shouldn't be calling it from .NET or C#. Not that I've got anything against Swift or Objective-C at all.
Oh no, of course. You know, I'm certainly not trying to promote that there is something either better or wrong or worse with one language over another.
Yeah.
It's just the point that we've both made so far, and that is, if you know one language or one framework, and you can do a task by leveraging some kind of port or whatever of a different language or framework, then you do it that way because you already know how to use. You use the tools that you know how to use, right?
Yeah.
Rather than, let's learn this. Like, let's say a customer client project manager says, I need you to build me this thing, right? You're going to go and build this thing in the tools and frameworks that you know how to use, because you know that you can be productive and effective in those tools and frameworks.
Yeah.
You're not being paid to learn how to use a brand new set of tools and frameworks, right?
That's it. The way I see it, I think the people that have learned Swift and Objective-C and been doing iOS development for a while, they've had all the fun doing this augmented reality stuff. I just want to show C# developers and .NET developers that they can create the same augmented reality experiences with code that they know.
Exactly right. And that's the whole point of having these ports and abstraction layers, is that you can then take that wonderfulness that somebody else has created and use it elsewhere, right? And that's what's great about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, ARKit isn't the only Apple framework that's been ported that can be targeted by C# and .NET developers. I think Apple's Core ML framework might have been ported as well, and that's their machine learning framework. So you could easily target that as a .NET developer. And I think there's some other frameworks that have been ported as well, but my mind's gone blank a bit. So it's not just ARKit that's been ported. There's quite a few other frameworks.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you that this episode is sponsored by Datadog. Also, stick around for the next 30 seconds to find out how you can get a free t-shirt. Datadog are a monitoring and analytics platform which monitor your infrastructure, application performance, and log management. Are you looking to move to the cloud, microservices, or .NET Core? Datadog can help with that. Their distributed tracing and APM provide end-to-end visibility into requests wherever they go, whether it's across hosts, containers, or service boundaries. See it for yourself. Start a 14-day trial today and Datadog will send you a free t-shirt. Find out more at datadoghq.com/.NET Core. That's datadoghq.com/DOTNETCORE, or check the show notes for a link. So we talked a little bit about how you can use Xamarin and how we believe at the time of recording that you can use Unity. And you mentioned HoloLens earlier on. Now, I feel like this is going to be a leading question, right? We talked about how you use the technology you already know. And I feel like the answer is going to be because it's the hardware I already have. But why iPhone over HoloLens? Just like I say, leading question, right?
Yeah, there's going to be a few reasons why you would choose either one of them. I think access to the devices themselves is one thing. I mean, we tend to carry either an Android or iPhone around with us. Again, they're not cheap, but they're general consumables that people tend to have. The HoloLens, I think the HoloLens 2 comes in at around $3,500 now, £3,500. I could be wrong, but I did check that fairly recently, and that's quite a lot of money for me to spend to experiment with. There's definitely use cases for the HoloLens. There's certain industries that are putting it to very good use, and they can afford, obviously, to buy that hardware and equip their staff and workforce with them. I think I've seen it used quite well in the medical industry, where they can, I think procedures have been performed using the HoloLens, actual surgeries. I've seen it, I think the MOD or the military in America, they're experimenting it as well as a bit of like a heads up display for giving them a bit more information on the battlefield, perhaps. I know that there's been police constabularies in England that have in their headquarters, what they like to have is great big TV screens showing the status of maybe crimes in certain areas. When they have the HoloLens on, they can have absolutely huge screens rather than that would be restrictive otherwise. You can't have a 200-inch screen, but if you use the HoloLens, you can have as many of these as you want to project information on. So there's certainly use cases for them. I believe if you want to target the HoloLens device, you have to use the Microsoft Mixed Reality Toolkit, which not something I've played around with, mainly because I don't have a HoloLens. If Microsoft want to send me a HoloLens to play around with, I can provide them my address. I'll be happy to sort of do some samples of that and try that out. But until then, I'm going to stick with creating augmented reality experiences for the device that I carry around with me.
Okay, excellent. And you talked a little earlier on, I just want to sort of double back on something. I just sort of thought of it now. You talked a little earlier on about how you're putting together a website of all of these samples that you've, for want of a better phrase, translated from, this is how you would do it in Swift. Or rather, you could do this thing in Swift, and let's see how to do it in C# or .NET, or I suppose F#. I'm not sure. That's going to be a question I come back to in a minute while I remember. So one of the things that I really like about that is that the way that I got started doing blogging and things like that was, I thought to myself, I've got this problem and I can't figure out how to solve it. I need this library or I need this function or this thing. Solve the problem, write down how I did it, turn it into a blog post, because 3 weeks later, when I am literally a different person, we talk about this all the time, right? You're writing code for another person. The other person may be literally another person, or it might be you tomorrow, right? You come up against the same problem. Oh, there's that website. Go to the website. There it is, right? So I for one, really like that idea.
I think I'm a firm believer in that one of the best ways of learning something is to teach it. And by that, I mean, you need to be able to understand it, get a grasp of something well enough to be able to explain it to other people. And you're probably going to learn around the subject as well, so that you can talk about it with some authority, with some authority, because you're going to have to field questions back. And that's exactly what I've done, really, is just, and for the website, and I'll talk about it later, it is really simple, basic things. That's because I started out really basic, simple. Like, how do I just get a blank app deployed to the device? There's actually a few gotchas and a few hurdles you have to overcome. You have to give the camera permissions, this and that. It sounds silly, but that's the first lesson on my website is how do you deploy a blank app, mobile app to your phone. And then the next one is like, how does the coordinate system work? X, Y, Z. And the next one is, okay, well, how do I place a basic cube, just a basic cube in the scene? How do I make it red? How do I make it blue? Okay, how do I make multiple cubes? How do I make a sphere? How do I make it rotate? And then going back to your Lego blocks analogy, one Lego block by itself isn't particularly interesting, but if you start combining them together, and each different Lego block have different functionalities, as you know, you start being able to quickly maintain, build up interesting experiences. So I can put a cube in a scene, pretty boring by itself. I could create a wall of blocks in a scene. I can turn on physics for them blocks, and then I can shoot a fake sphere with mass and force at that wall and see it all knock down. And that's just using some blocks, built-in physics into the scene and a sphere. Pretty basic stuff. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to have fun. I've had a lot of fun learning this stuff, and I'm trying to teach it in the same way by encouraging people to try different things with it.
Sure, yeah, sure. I do like that because, like you say, you've got a box that's not exciting, a couple of boxes, a little bit more exciting, and you build up to it, right?
Yeah.
Same way that all of us learned to code, right? We don't start with, nothing about writing code, and then you now have a website or some e-commerce platform. You start at hello world, then you start at loops and if statements, and then you move up to method calls, and then you move up to APIs, and then you move up to being able to do things like maybe in a functional manner, or then you maybe look at extensions and classes, or maybe you go for functions and learn what a monad is, right? You slowly build up that knowledge. You don't just go, I'm going to make the game, so I'll start with nothing, and then 2 days later I have a 3D AAA title.
Yeah, absolutely. It is just learning the basics, building up bit by bit.
Sure, okay. So the question I wanted to come back to is, we talked a lot specifically about C#, and now I don't know whether you have much experience with F#, but do you know whether you can do the same augmented reality things with F#, or like I say, your experience may be limited to C#, but do you know whether you can also do it with F#?
So the quick answer is I don't know if you can, but I'm optimistic in that these VB.NET, C# and F# all combine down to the same MSIL intermediary language, so I don't see why you couldn't. I've got a feeling you probably can, but I've not tried it, so I can't say yes or no.
Fair enough. What we'll do is I'll leave that as an exercise to the listener to find out whether they can build something in F#. Then they can build something. Then they can both let us know and tell us how they did it, right?
Definitely.
Excellent. Okay. So let's just have a look at this. Okay. So you've talked a lot about how you're making all of these augmented reality experiences, these demos, these products. Mm-hmm. I do want to quickly throw in something about, I want to say about May time last year, I actually went to Japan on a vacation, and we went to a place called Canal City, which is a shopping center and hotel. It's weird, but a multi-level shopping center in the middle of a city called Fukuoka. It's called Canal City because there's a literal canal that runs through it. And whilst we were there, they had a number of experiences that I want to say are augmented reality, but they had nothing to do with your phone. So we were there for the Pac-Man 25th or 30th anniversary. And one of the things they did was they chose one of the walls and projected a game of Space Invaders onto the wall. And the way that it was working is you had to clap along to the music to make the what do you call it, the player or whatever, shoot the Space Invaders. Someone else was controlling the left and right, and you all had to clap as a group to make it shoot. Which I don't know whether it was more of a gimmick, someone was actually pushing a shoot button or not, or whether it was actually all filmed. I don't know, but it was loads of fun. And the other one was there was it was quite literally called New Godzilla, Shin Godzilla. This was a new movie that was coming out a few weeks after we went home, and they had a thing there as well, and it was like, Godzilla is attacking, and you have to get this one. You needed your phone. You had to get your phone out and go to this URL and push a fire button on your phone, and it would fire a rocket from roughly where you were in relation to the screen at Godzilla. So if you were on the top deck looking down, it would fire it roughly from like the top row downwards. I don't know how they would do it, maybe just GPS or something, or elevation. But that's kind of my experience of augmented reality.
They are certainly becoming mainstream, aren't they, and more prevalent. And I think they do a really good job of getting you engaged and getting noticed. And one of the best things is used by marketing. Because all of a sudden we're talking about Pac-Man and we're talking about Godzilla. When would we normally be talking about that? One of the ones I've seen, which is really good, is I think in a bus stop, on one of the sides of the bus is actually a TV screen, but there's a camera on the other side, and 99% of the time it looks like you can see through it, and it looks like glass. And then it might have like aliens attacking on the other side. And you'd see people like looking around the bus stop to see if it's really happening. Because it looks like there's aliens on Oxford Road or some street in London.
That's wonderful. I really want to see that out in the wild now. Because I can imagine that just like, you're just going about your day. You know nothing about augmented reality. Bus goes by, it's got a window in it, you can see aliens attacking. That's genius. I love that. But yeah, so I guess you talked about how you've done some of your demos and sort of experiments and things like that. What are some of your favorite ones that you've built so far? Like, give us an example of some of the things that you've done that you're really sort of proud of and excited about.
Sure. I did one that a fairly simple one, but it looks quite advanced. I assure you it's not. And that was showing the sort of periodic table in augmented reality that you could then walk around, and it had all the names and symbols of the periodic table, and you click on them on the screen, of course, and it would appear to animate them in the real world. And I could do more with that. I could maybe show the element, or I could show the atoms in the element, or I could show a bit more information about when it was discovered and stuff like that. But I think that's quite a nice use case for education, because it's been proven that children engage a lot more with education if the subject they're learning is taught to them in an engaging way. When I was at school, we just had textbooks. I think a few years after that, they started giving kids iPads, and they're now my 6-year-old girl, she's 7 now, it was her birthday at the weekend, is given homework, mainly because of the incident, as you say, to do a homework online on websites. And it works. She's learning a times table. She's learning to read, not from textbooks, not from teachers, but from these different experiences that people have built. And I think augmented reality has got a big part to play in teaching for education. That's one I did. I'm trying to think of some others I've done. I think that's probably my favourite one for education reasons. There's other industries I want to experiment with. I want to do one in the automotive industry. I've seen a good example of that, which is probably a bit beyond my skills at the moment, is that you can get a Tesla to appear on your driveway, and then you can customize the color and trim and various aspects of it. That would be a good one to play around with. Yeah, there's all sorts of things I want to do. I'm only just getting started with it.
Sure. I do remember this is going back a few years, I think 2015. I was working on a project that was a car e-commerce site, but for sort of used vehicles. And they had this system where the sales people would have to use they used the term iPad, but it could be any branded tablet, and they had to make a video of going around the car, hitting very specific points at very specific times. So it was like a minute and a half, and they had to sort of walk up to the car from the driver's side and sort of stick the camera into the interior of the car, look at the steering wheel, come back, and then walk around to the back and open the boot and go in, because it was almost like they were trying to do augmented reality without doing augmented reality. Mm-hmm. So you could watch the video and see what the car was like. But I could imagine doing like a walking tour around a car with your phone, right? Mm-hmm. Just like there isn't a car there, but you're holding your phone up and you walk around it and you go, oh, right, yeah. So that's what the steering wheel looks like, and that's how big it would be if I were to hold it. You could maybe put your hand out to try and hold it to give you an idea. And, this is how much space there is in the back for little ones or for shopping or things, and this is how big the boot feels. This is what it feels like this is what the experience is like to open it. Obviously not feeling like, but to open the boot, the whatever it is. I don't know what the international term for the storage space at the back of the car. Yeah. That kind of thing, just sort of walking around and getting an idea of what it looks like and the sort of space it takes up, rather than just like make one appear on my drive and change the color.
I think the experience that you talked about there, I think I've seen videos of people developing similar things to that. I've definitely seen a virtual reality one where you can put a headset on and you can almost sit in the car. I imagine you'd probably sit in your chair, but
sure.
It would then look like what it would if you're behind the steering wheel and you can look around into the back seat and passenger vehicle. But yeah, I think that's actually been developed by someone. I've just remembered another experience that I'm quite fond of that I developed. So another one that I quite like is calling photography an API, and then surround myself in a photosphere, what I call a photosphere anyway, and it's about, 50 images all pointed towards the center where I am in the middle of this sphere, and I can look around at them, and I quite enjoyed that. And that was one of the first experiences that I made, and it's again very, very simple. And then I thought, well, where can I take this? And this is where your imagination is really important. If you've not got a very good imagination, it's probably not the best technology for you to learn. Conversely, if you've got a good imagination, you really unlimited what you could do with this sort of stuff. So something that I've been playing around with is getting talking to the Twitter API and placing tweets in augmented reality space. And then you can think, well, where can you take that? You could call a number of social media APIs and maybe combine Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I don't know what the cool kids using these days. Snapchat. I don't know. There's TikTok. I think that's the coolest one these days that I'm not on. And place them in some sort of timeline that say, okay, this tweet happened, and then this Facebook post happened, and then this Snapchat happened, and then just being able to, again, not having to jump between them on a 2D screen. You can just look around and see what's going on in your sort of combined social media world. That's and maybe just having them fade out after the 30 seconds old, and then fade a new one in that's just happened, using sort of real-time communication, using Signal R or something like that. And that's another experience that I'm really keen to develop.
Sure. And then perhaps you could maybe reach out and touch one of these status objects, and it could maybe go, right, okay, this is the one tweet by Lee. You press it or you tap it on your phone or whatever it is that you do, some user interface interaction, and it can maybe show you a thread or go, okay, so let's show you this and the most recent tweets around it that Lee had said. Or maybe I could do some sentiment analysis, figure out what it is you were talking about, and search for other related things, right? Yeah. Totally limitless.
Absolutely. It when imagination starts playing around, it just starts going, it just takes off. Where I want to take that next is getting voice control. I don't know how to do voice control on Xamarin or iOS devices. I'm not even sure how possible it is, but I do know how to do it in .NET. So I could have a .NET console application running somewhere that's got microphone, and I could say, show photos of cheese, I don't know, and then it would show cheese, or show me, search Twitter for, I don't know, WWDC, and then it would just filter the tweets. So starting combining different technologies, I guess is what I'm saying. You don't have to just use augmented reality. They're using speech recognition, using signal arm, real-time communication. When you start combining all these separate technologies, you do start making some amazing things.
Sure. I do like that. I like my problem is that I end up with almost the too overactive imagination. I get to a point where, would it be awesome to do this and then this and then this and then, and I come up with a huge list of things to do and never do it.
It is, yeah. It's about baby steps, really.
Yeah.
Small iterations. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So I've read that you're also in the process of putting together a book as well. Is that?
That's right. Yeah. So I was thinking, well, I'm very keen on letting the .NET and C# developers know that they can create these experiences. Over then, the website that I'm putting together, how else can I tell people? And it's things like talking to yourself on these sort of things. It's talking to user groups. And then I thought, gosh, I wonder if I could write a book about it, because there's been other books written by how to create augmented reality experiences using Swift and Objective-C. Why can't I write one in C# on .NET? So I just contacted a publisher, I think A-Press in this case, filled out a quick form, had a bit of an idea together, and then lo and behold, they seemed quite interested in the project. So I'm just, at the moment, I'm just churning out chapters and just submitting them. And one day there might be a book at the end of it. There's certainly an agreement there, but these things don't always end well, but I'm very optimistic.
Sure.
The technology can move on before the book's completed. But yeah, I really hope it doesn't.
I like that. So due to what I call the podcast time machine wibbly wobbliness, we record these a little bit in advance. So to give inside baseball, this is sort of the middle of July and when we're recording, and my current schedule means that at the moment this episode may not drop until November.
Okay.
So what I can do is, if you'd like, I can get back in contact with you around about the time it drops and say, hey, is there any more information on this? And if there is, we can put it into the show notes. If there's not, then I can say, well, maybe there's a mailing list or some way to register interest or something like that. Maybe we can drive people towards that, because it's something I would be interested in for sure. Because like I said, I'm going into this conversation, I had no idea what augmented reality is, and now I've got loads of ideas happening in my head. So, maybe we can drive people towards that. So is that going to be, like you said, is that just going to be, what is it just going to be? I don't mean to just put, in bunny quotes. Is it, so it's .NET, augmented reality, Xamarin, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's it. It's I think the draft title is something like augmented reality for .NET developers using C#, .NET and Xamarin.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So I'll try and make the listeners, what we need to do is get the listeners to do some Googling on that and try and find that out and see if there's some kind of register your interest page and get loads of people to be interested in it. And then, A-Press will definitely take you up on it, and let's see what happens, right? Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So what are some of the places that you would recommend people go to learn a bit more about augmented reality then? I know that you said earlier on that when you started at least, there weren't that many places to go and find out. So is this like, obviously, your website you're putting together, maybe the talks you're doing, what's the best place? I don't want to sort of put words in your mouth there.
Sure. So Apple, if you search for Apple augmented reality, their augmented reality section's quite good. It goes from the basic principles. It talks about their framework, AR kit, and it's a good starting point. And then you can start downloading samples, deploying them onto your phone. That's quite good fun as well, because if you have got Xcode, I think, installed on your Mac, you can just download their examples, and they're pretty good to go, really. You just compile them, deploy them to your phone, and all of a sudden you're tracking your face. They're quite good, especially to get your imagination going, like you were saying.
Sure. Okay. So you mentioned earlier on about the website that you're putting together. Does this exist yet, or is it still sort of in a state of flux?
No, it does, and I'm constantly adding information to it. It's at xamarinarkit.com. So kind of the title is, the clue's in the title. It's combining them two technologies, Xamarin and ARKit, and there's, I call them lessons, but there's a very loose definition of the word. It's mainly my understanding of the concept, some code of the things I've tried that you can copy and paste and try yourself, and then sometimes, most of the time, a video of the effect as well, whether it's a basic sphere or if it's this periodic table that's floating the code samples on there for it as well.
Sure, excellent. Okay, so we'll make sure to let people go towards that. So if you are listening, so what I say to the listeners is, when you download the episode in your podcatcher, which is the app that you use to listen to the episode, there'll be a link to the full version of the show notes. Otherwise, it would take very long for the show notes to download, because there'll be a transcription and a bunch of links. So press through to those full show notes, and you'll see a bunch of links towards the bottom of all the things that Lee is talking about. So then you don't have to, what I'm saying is, if you're driving anywhere, don't be diving across the dashboard to get a pen and paper to write down a website, because I've written it all down for you, right? Excellent. Okay. So are those the places you recommend to go to learn more? There's Xamarin, ARKit, and the Apple documentation. That's where you'd start, I guess. That's
where I'd start. I think it's not the best starting point if you're an Android sort of person. You might want to start looking from the Android side of things. I think if you're interested in Unity, or you already know a bit of Unity, just Google around Unity and augmented reality, and I'm sure they've got quite a few tutorials as well to show you.
Sure. Okay. So you said on the website there are these sort of, in your words, the lessons that you can sort of grab hold of and try out. You said that there are code snippets, but do you have any sort of open source, hey, here's a full project you can grab and download and try out yourself?
Not yet. However, as part of the book project, what I'm trying to do is create a single code base that's got all of the examples in it, so you can run each at a time, almost like a companion app to the book. So you can say, okay, you've got this one app you can deploy to your phone. Let's try face tracking. Let's try image detection. Let's try plane detection. So I'm not quite worked on that yet, but
okay,
that's kind of in the works.
Sure, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. So what about ways that listeners can sort of catch up with you, see what you're doing, what you're working on? Are you active? I know that we sort of connected on LinkedIn, but are you active on Twitter, or is it just check out the website, or what's the deal? How do I find out more about you?
Yeah, well, I certainly try to be active. I'm fairly easy to find on Twitter and on the web. There's not many Lee Englestones. There is another Lee Englestone. He's a race car driver. That's not me. I'm the other guy who's not a race car driver. So I'm on Twitter at just Lee Englestone. I'm on YouTube at the same, where I post my videos. My blog is at www.manchesterdeveloper.com. And I'm going to probably try and start doing some Twitch streams as well, but I've never done live streaming, but I'm going to give it a go and see how I do.
Sure. As someone who did it for a while and then stopped for a while because the podcast got in the way, it is a very fun experience, especially if you can get some people sort of helping out in chat. You get these people asking questions, or they'll say, hey, you missed a semicolon, or have you tried this method or whatever. It's a wonderful collaborative learning experience. Even if you already know everything that you're going to do, it's this great way of sort of, like you said, to reinforce that learning experience of teaching someone else. In a previous career, I was actually a teacher, and one of the things that I would do at the end of each lesson, you've got 10 minutes, get all the things you need. I want you to each do a presentation for 30 seconds on what you've learned today. And it's forcing them to sort of reiterate it, right? And that's a great idea, is teach someone else.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. I'm still getting my head around live streaming. There's things like raids where a bunch of people just come to your live stream, and it's a raid. I need to read up about these things, but it's something I'm keen to do.
Sure. I would recommend, there's a previous guest. At the time of recording, the episode isn't out yet, but there's a previous guest for the show called Andy Morell. I believe that's how you pronounce it, Andy Morell. He's part of the Live Coders team that Jeff Fritz at Microsoft has sort of put together.
Mm-hmm.
And he has recently been helping out put together a conference for live coders. If you can, maybe have a chat with him about, what kind of things do I need to know to get started. But essentially, when I did it, I used an external microphone and the camera built into my laptop, and I was just away. The problem then is you've got window management, right? You're trying to share this screen, but everything's happening over there. But yeah, it's from my limited experience, it's loads of fun, and you don't really need to do that much. Most of the heavy lifting is done for you, so that's pretty good.
Oh, that's good. If it's another avenue that I can sort of tell .NET developers about this stuff, then it's definitely one I want to try.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, definitely. And you can do a thing where you can capture the screen of your phone as well, I believe. So you could maybe go, hey, so I'm literally compiling it now. And guess what? Push a button and your phone screen appears on screen. And here I am playing with it and moving around and pushing a button. I don't know. It's loads of fun to do.
Sure. I'll let you know if that goes live.
Excellent. Well, watch this space. Excellent. Well, what I'd like to say, Lee, is thank you ever so much for joining me this evening to talk about augmented reality. Because like I said, I had no idea. I'm thinking it's Minority Report. You've got to use these special gloves. But apparently not. So that's good.
That's fine. The last thing I'll probably say on the subject, if that's the case, that augmented reality it is coming. It's here in many regards. And more of us software developers are going to be developing augmented reality experiences and user interfaces for all these companies that want to take advantage of it. So I'd probably start getting it on your radar if you can. If not now, then sometime soon. It'll be a good skill to have over the next few years, I think.
Sure. Okay. So what you're saying is we should all run out and buy your book, right?
When it's out, absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. Well, yeah, like I said, Lee, thank you ever so much. It's been really educational for me, and I'm sure it will for the listeners. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That was my interview with Lee Englestone about augmented reality. Be sure to check the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at .netcore.show, and there will be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave me a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/subscribe for ways to do that, and to come back next time for some more .NET Core goodness. See you again real soon. See you later, folks. The .NET Core podcast is a production of RJJ Software Limited.